The Iranian Air Force is equipped with mig-29A and mig-29's BM variants, and that's the airframe of most of them. They probably upgrade them all with local avionics and communications to give them the capability to carry AMs and more modern AA missiles. The old mig-29As that fled to Iran from Iraq are mostly very old versions with R-60 and very basic models of R-27. The Iranians upgrade them all for sure to carry the most modern R-73 guided missiles. The upgrades of AMs will allow the MiG-29s to carry most Iranian munitions. Recently, video has emerged showing one of the world's more secretive air forces doing just that, with an Iranian fighter launching an infrared-guided missile at a target at very close quarters and at an impressively low level. The video in question shows very clearly an Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force, or IRIAF, MiG-29 Fulcrum fighter jet taking part in a live-fire air-to-air missile drill alongside an F-5 Tiger II jet, apparently a two-seat F-5F model, from the same service. The MiG-29 and the F-5 begin by flying in fingertip formation, with the Fulcrum tucked in behind the American-made fighter's left wing. As the MiG pulls level with the F-5, the latter launches an aerial target, which then streaks ahead of the Fulcrum. The F-5 pulls away to the right, and moments later, the MiG launches a single missile from under its right wing. Leaving a prominent smoke trail behind it, the missile then homes in on the target and detonates. The time between the missile coming off the rail and the explosion is no more than around 4 seconds. What we see fired by the MiG-29 is very clearly a Vimpel R-73 heat-seeking air-to-air missile, a popular and widely used Soviet-designed weapon that's known in the West as the AA-11 Archer. It has been in use in 1984, but remains a generally well-regarded weapon due to its high levels of maneuverability and the fact it can be designated via the pilot's helmet-mounted sight, as well as by the aircraft's radar or infrared search and track (IRST) sensor. It's not clear if this live-fire drill was part of a larger exercise or if it was even intended for public consumption, possibly during one of Iran's regular wargames. Perhaps it was both an exercise and a display, especially bearing in mind it took place at such a low level and apparently over members of the public. Regardless, the video provides us with relatively rare imagery of one of Iran's foremost air defense fighters in action. The IRIAF MiG-29s, while old, represent a relatively potent capability for an air force that has been seriously hamstringed by sanctions imposed in response to its nuclear program, which has prevented the acquisition of any new fighter equipment for many years. The first batch of 18 MiG-29s was acquired from the then Soviet Union and began to be delivered to Iran in June 1990. 4 additional MiG-29s were evacuated to Iran from Iraq in 1991 during Operation Desert Storm. The importance assigned to the Iranian MiG-29s is reflected in their role of air defense for the Iranian capital, Tehran, as well as escorting VIP aircraft. A demonstration of the capabilities of the Fulcrum and its primary short-range missile armament is important to ensure that this important part of Iran's air defense network still functions as advertised. A live-fire exercise of this type, while hardly reflective of most air combat scenarios, provides valuable training to pilots and ground crew alike, with a rare chance to gain real-world experience of the end-to-end use of an infrared-guided missile. In particular, it's noteworthy that the R-73 seen here is apparently not a special training missile, but a live version, with a warhead as well as the usual motor and infrared guidance package, evidenced by the fairly massive fireball left on the target as the MiG peels away. The Archer has a rod-type warhead that includes a little over 5 pounds of high explosive. In this way, the pilot of the Fulcrum would have been provided with a level of realism impossible to replicate in a simulator, or with fully inert weapons which don't launch off the rail and complete the engagement. The Iranian Air Force currently fields 2 mig-29 squadrons, all comprised of mig-29 AUB variants, which are the most basic models produced. The mig-29A first entered service in 1982 in the Soviet Air Force, and other than 2 squadrons of F-14 Tomcats, they are the only post-third generation fighters in Iranian service capable of air-to-air combat. Other than those delivered from the USSR, 4 more MiG-29s were acquired from Iraq when the Iraqi Air Force redeployed its assets to escape Western bombardment in 1991. Iran planned to acquire more MiG-29 squadrons in the 1990s before US pressure on post-Soviet Russia obstructed further sales. Although being refurbished domestically, MiG-29s are not thought to have been modernized with the latest R-77 active radar-guided missiles. They have, however, received relatively modern R-73 missiles for short-range engagements which use infrared guidance, are cued by helmet-mounted sights, and can engage targets at high off-boresight angles. The R-73 was not a standard armament for export clients in the Soviet era, and the Iraqi Air Force's lack of such missiles was seen as a key impediment to its ability to engage American squadrons at close range in 1991. It was the R-73 which was demonstrated in the most recent exercises, the advanced capabilities of which complement the MiG-29's extreme maneuverability. The Soviet jets are still considered to have the best low-speed flight performance in the world other than aircraft such as the Chinese J-10C with modern thrust vectoring technologies. While F-14s have been assigned to guard Iranian nuclear sites, MiG-29s are relied on for the defense for the Iranian capital Tehran. They have also been deployed in the past for escorting VIP aircraft. The fighter has a relatively short range, but a much higher rate of operational readiness due to its more conservative maintenance requirements relative to the older and much heavier F-14s. A show of force by Iran comes amid high tensions with the United States and Israel over the country's nuclear program, with negotiations with Washington dragging out and Iran continuing to produce highly enriched uranium in the meantime. Israeli officials have warned on multiple occasions that they could be willing to take military action to prevent Iran from allegedly developing nuclear weapons, although the Israeli Air Force's ability to do so without US support remains limited. The MiG-29 exercise also follows a mass cyber attack on Iranian energy infrastructure, although Iranian officials have yet to state which party they believe to be responsible. Iran has focused most of its investments in air defense on ground-based systems, including acquiring Russian S-300 systems and developing its own analogs such as the Corded 15. A UN arms embargo on Iran ended in October 2020, and it has long been speculated that the country could acquire modern fighters, with the Chinese 4++ generation J-10C seen as the most likely candidate.